Hi there. I'm Heather Long, USA Today bestselling author, chaos gremlin, and an unapologetic lover of morally gray characters. You might know me from series like The 82nd Street Vandals or Bay Ridge Royals, where happily ever after, often comes with bruises, secrets, and probably some serious emotional damage. Today, I'm going to answer some questions about writing, characters, inspiration, and maybe some about all the behind the scenes chaos that goes into building the worlds that I write. So grab a drink, coffee, wine, maybe something stronger. I have my coffee right here. Here we go. First question, talking about the writing journey and inspiration. What inspired you to transition from urban fantasy to darker romance and romantic suspense? Well, funnily enough, urban fantasy is literally the first book that I wrote. That would be the Chance Monroe series. Earth Witches Aren't Easy, although way back when I wrote this, it was originally released as Primeval. I don't even think that was actually the original title of it. It might be, I don't remember anymore. It's been about 25 years since I wrote that book. Yeah. Anywho, but it was one of the first full-length novels that I completed that wasn't some form of fan fiction or a story that I got bored with and kind of wandered off the plot and just never got back to it. The shocking number of old story ideas that I have still in a folder that I'm never going to do anything with is probably as long as my arm or longer. But I mean, that's just the nature of it. I mean, I know a lot of writers, and a lot of us are the same way. Some ideas, they come to life and they sink their claws into you, and you just cannot say no. Others show up, and you're like, well, that sounds pretty good. I'm kind of curious. And maybe it will grow over time. Other times, it just doesn't. I mean, so it's like, in many ways, for me, I've always said that I'm a very eclectic writer because I've always been an eclectic reader. I love urban fantasy. I still love urban fantasy. I've always loved romantic suspense. I still love romantic suspense. Darker romance, I think I matured into that, which sounds weird, but when I was younger, I didn't always want all the doom and gloom because there was enough of that in history classes and in real life. I didn't want the darker bits of it. But I did, as I got older, I actually appreciated more of the vibe from dark romance. But I'd always appreciated darker tales. So I think it was just a matter of being able to reach that place in my muse to get there. So I can't even say that something particularly inspired me to go from one to the other. I mean, you're looking at a span of I was doing urban fantasy, and then I wrote, there are 3 books in the Chance Monroe series. The next major book that I wrote, that I was shooting for publication with, was actually just straight up contemporary romance. But I had also done a bunch of novellas and one-shot stories that were, again, more contemporary based. The next real paranormal that I dove into would have been The Wolves of Willow Bend. So I don't think it was kind of an overnight change. It was definitely more of a one step at a time. And now I'm here, but that doesn't mean I'm not ever going back because, again, I'm an eclectic reader and an eclectic writer. So I go where the story takes me. So that's kind of, I don't know if that actually answered the question, but that's kind of what inspired me to transition along the way. The second question. This one makes me laugh. Can you share the significance of your grandmother's Harlequin romance novels in shaping your writing path? Well, yeah. Growing up, Nan read to me from Harlequin romance novels because she didn't like picture books. She didn't like little kid stories. She just didn't. I think they bored her. And I love to be read to. I mean, I was reading by the time I was 3, but I still like to be read to. And I was definitely precocious when it came to words. But so she would read to me those Harlequins, and it was always, well, okay, I'm going to presume because I don't actually know, but if there was a spicy scene, they went to take a nap. If there was, maybe another spicy scene, they might have gone to do their chores. And as I got older, and when she was still reading to me, like when I was 3 or 4, it was a case of, well, if they had to take a nap, then so did I. Or if they went to do their chores, then maybe I should go do mine. And, going forward, I think I was 9 the first time I got into one of the Harlequins and decided just to read it myself. I even remember the name of the very first one I ever read. It was written by Penny Jordan, and it was called Escape to Desire. And I remember the entire plot. It was a woman on vacation, I want to say the Bahamas, but it might have been a different made-up island, I don't know. And she got kidnapped by some, I want to say, guerrilla revolutionary type people. She didn't know why she was kidnapped, but she was. So she got kidnapped from this resort. She ends up in a cave with another prisoner who's apparently a wealthy guy that they were trying to get ransomed. Between the two of them, they escaped. They went on a run through the jungle. Of course, they ended up having wild monkey sex. And then she got bitten by a spider and had this huge thing. And she was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And he got her back to civilization and turned her over to someone at the doctor's or a hospital or whatever. And then he fucked off right out of there. And she doesn't even know his name. And then she gets back. I don't think she knew his name. Anyway, so she gets back to the UK, which is where she lived. And she's extremely pregnant because she got knocked up. And she ends up applying for a job or gets offered a job by this dude that she didn't know his name. And then he finds out she's pregnant. And he finds out it's his. And we have all the forced proximity and the, unexpected baby and all this other stuff. And of course, they fall in love, blah, 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 happily ever after. Let's have a few misunderstandings and arguments along the way and some tears and, But I vividly remember this book, and I was 9. And I remember when I was done with it, going to my grandmother and going, they didn't take a lot of naps. So what naps were you talking about? Which books have the naps in it? And she just looked at me like, okie dokie. But from that point forward, I read the Harlequins as much as she did. I mean, I read everything, though. Then I know some people are probably going to sit here and go, you were 9 years old. You were too young. I raised my kid with the same rule I was kind of raised with by my grandmother. If I was old enough to ask the question, I was old enough to have the answer. And if I had the critical thinking abilities to get there, fine. If anything happened that I didn't understand, I either went and looked it up at the library in an encyclopedia or a dictionary, and allow me to state categorically, yes, I am that old, and no, I did not have the internet to explain this stuff to me. Anyway, so needless to say, I liked romance, and I liked romance in pretty much all of my media, whether it was fairy tales or television shows. I was a huge soap opera fan too, yes, and I always shipped couples. So yeah, I would say that it heavily influenced my choices down the line. And I prefer to have an element of romance even in stuff that isn't necessarily romance specific. And I don't apologize for it. I like Happily Ever After, even if I think Happily Ever After is still a work in progress. But anyway, there you go. That's the best I can do for that answer for you. All right. Next up, I've got 2 more questions for the writing journey and inspiration. And then we'll take a break and we'll come back. Probably in another video because I think I want to keep these condensed to the topics. So I'll work on my introductions as we go forward. Anyway, question number 3. How do you approach character development, especially in complex dynamics like the Bay Ridge Royal series? I let the characters tell me. More often than not, if I decide a character is going to do something or feels a certain way or is into a whole kind of thing, they don't usually like that. And sometimes, particularly if I try to force them into doing something that I really would want them to do, yeah, they'll fuck off right out of there and they won't even tell me what happens next until I backtrack and let them tell me the story. A lot of times, a character will come to me. That's just generally my process. It's just I I almost always think of the character before I think of the story. And I don't think I've ever had one where I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever had one where I had a story first and the character came later. I probably did. I'm not thinking of any of them. All the major ones I'm thinking off my head, top of my head right now, the character came first. I had a premise once. Now that's the closest I would say is I had a premise before I had a character. But that, as soon as I decided I was going to turn that premise into a story, the character presented herself. She just showed up, said, "Hi, here I am." And so a lot of times when I say these characters show up and they're fully formed, they are. I have to get to know them every bit as much as the reader does. And there are times where they will surprise me. And I have said this before. I will do an outline of something and I'll say, okay, so this happens and this happens. This is the major turning point. This is this. And when I say outline, it's not like a full professional outline. Mine are more like kind of a chapter map. So I have a solid idea of where the story is going. Inevitably, if it goes the way it is in my head, it's going to be the way I put in that chapter map. It never goes that way. It never does. I always leave some chapters blank on purpose because I know the story is going to take on a life of its own. The characters are going to go where they go, and the dynamics, the confusing bits of them are going to show up, and they're gonna take care of it for me. And I don't necessarily know what's going to happen. I have discovered that my subconscious, and I have said this for years, that my subconscious is a hell of a lot smarter than the rest of me. In some series that I've written, one off the top of my head would be the Fevered Heart series. That's a complex set of relationships, familial and friendships, small town, 1800s. These are characters who are like the X-Men, but were set in the 1800s. And so it's cowboys and X-Men, sort of. I mean, for lack of a better term. But they are very different kinds of people, and there's all kinds of issues that will crop up. But there was stuff that happened in the very first book that I wasn't really sure how to point. But I knew it made sense why, in the context of the story at the time, it made sense. 3 books later, it suddenly made all the sense in the world that bit was just so much more important than I ever realized. And that's what I mean when I say my subconscious is a lot smarter than the rest of me. And I think that's also how it pays off as far as the characters go, because these characters know their own story. They know what they like. They know what they don't like. Sometimes they know stuff, almost always they know stuff that I don't. And a lot of times half the fun of writing the book is to find out. And yes, I have been every bit as surprised as some of my readers by crap that has happened. But that's a story for another day. Okay, last question for our writing journey and inspiration. What does happily ever after mean to you, both in storytelling and in life? Well, I think I kind of covered that earlier. So I should have just tied these 2 questions together, but I think this is a nice ending point to get to. Happily ever after to me is a concept. It's not a tangible thing. It's not quantifiable. You can't say I made X amount of dollars and that is what happily ever after is. You can't say I picked up this many books. That is happily ever after. Happily ever after is not quantifiable. It's a concept, which means it's also a state of mind, which is not something you can live in because our moods fluctuate, our day-to-day existence fluctuates, our life circumstances fluctuate. So our interpersonal relationships will fluctuate. Sometimes you can be further along in your relationship than the other person is. So I believe strongly, both in life and in fiction, that happily ever after is always a work in progress. It is, you get out of that relationship what you put into it. So if you are committed to it and you are putting in what you need, then a lot of times that's what you're going to get back. And if you're not, that's a time to revisit and say, is this the right relationship? Now, I fully believe you can love someone and have it not work out. And I fully believe they can love you and it doesn't work out. We love lots of people and we care about lots of people, but life isn't just about who you love. It's about the way you grow your relationship together. And I also believe that you need to be friends. And I think that's something each of my characters has had to go through at some time or other, because Love can fade. You can go through intense moments. You can go through some calmer moments. I can honestly say that, the way I love my husband now is not the way I loved him 20 years ago, or even 30 years ago, or 10 years ago. That love has evolved and that relationship has changed. But the friendship has never faltered. And it's the friendship that became the foundation. And I think I do that with the books. Anyway, well, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I loved answering these questions. I'm looking forward to working on, I will have a couple more videos coming up, one on the creative process, one on reader engagement and community, another one on personal insights. These are the three that I have planned right now. I'm sure there will be more. If it's anything like my to be written list, there'll be a lot more. But anyways, I loved answering the questions and giving you a peek behind the curtain of how stories come to life for me. And whether you're deep into Vandals or just discovering the, Bay Ridge Royals, your support, your love, and your absolute chaos in the comments will mean the world. So if you feel like leaving me a comment, I would love to read it. If you've got more questions, drop them down below. I will read them. And, even if I don't respond right away, that doesn't mean I didn't see it, just so you know. And I have ADHD. I will freely admit there are times when I will read something and then I think I responded and I come back a week later and I'm like, ooh, I did in my head. Sorry. But anyways, thank you. And to my fellow writers out there, your voice matters. Even when the words are stubborn. And let me tell you, words are hard. Till next time, stay fierce, read hard, and never trust the quiet ones.